Morning, team, and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast, the Because I Can podcast. And I wanted to get my own back, really. So last week was all a little bit veterinarian for me, really. And I felt like a little bit outnumbered. So we've sort of shifted back slightly towards my area of comfort zone this week. And I guess this week we want to invite Vanessa Ruck to come and talk to you. Some of you may or may not have seen Vanessa, but you may have seen the girl on a bike on social media, which is Vanessa, and we'll get her to share her story with you shortly. But today's theme really is a little bit about resilience. You've heard Paul and I talk in the past about, our sort of pet hate is people that go on a resilience course or a resilience qualification. It's not a thing. You become resilient as a result of bouncing back, picking yourself up again, and seeing what's going. And I have to say that I don't feel very resilient today. I spent an hour and a half on a motocross bike on the sand on Saturday, which is certainly not going to be the equivalent of doing 2.5 weeks every day on one. And I can barely walk today. So we'll need to work on my resilience, I think, a little bit going forward. But Vanessa, welcome. Very nice to have you here this morning.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Vanessa, I just think before we go down any road, people and certainly quite a lot of the guys that listen to this have heard Paul and I. We've delivered training with them before, but just give us a quick overview of your kind of story, because I think it's pretty inspirational actually, and it gives everybody listening a huge amount of context for you talking about resilience.
Yeah, absolutely. I describe myself as a motorcycle rider, racer, and adventurer, but my journey to motorcycles was not that of the usual path one takes to finding two wheels. Basically, it started back in 2014. I was cycling home from work on a pretty normal Tuesday, and in a single moment, life as I knew it changed. I drove through some traffic lights. My light was green. And unfortunately, a car coming the other way decided not to stop at their red light, and they cut across in front of me, leaving me with nowhere to go. And I went straight into the side of the car. And with that impact, life as I knew it was effectively taken away for a considerably long period of time. I would describe myself as an absolute adrenaline junkie and extreme sports lover prior to the accident. So going to a position where I then needed 7 surgeries, including 2 reconstructed body parts over the following 7 years, it really has been a journey of ups and downs. And I kind of describe that journey as being like a roller coaster where I was effectively battling. My dream was always to get back to a pain-free life. Unfortunately, I've adjusted my expectations, and more so now to getting to a body where I can still get up and get out there and do sports and make the most of it. And I'm determined never to use my slightly reconstructed body as an excuse not to get out there and give it a go, basically. And that is all about 2 wheels now, which is kind of hence the name The Girl on a Bike.
Paul, we talk about resilience. One of the things I find fascinating about your story, Vanessa, is often when Paul and I talk about resilience, it's we've chosen to do something. It's how do you continue to do that? So if you put yourself through, I don't know, selection for special duties within the military, if you choose to go and climb Everest or cycle race or whatever it might be, you've chosen to put yourself there, if that makes sense. And even through maybe we've been doing a load of work with schools, the kids, the education stuff. You've kind of got to do that to go through it. The bit I find fascinating with you is it was like that, wasn't it? It was like a switch. It was you got up that morning as per normal, if you see what I mean. You kind of didn't make a choice. You weren't trying to achieve anything. You've had to have that because it was taken off you. And for me, psychologically, that must be quite different, I would think.
Yeah, I felt very much out of control because it wasn't a result of my actions. I have relived that accident more times than you could possibly count to think, could I have done something differently that would have made that not happen? And unfortunately, it was exactly what an accident is. It was an accident and it happened. And there is an element where if it happened when I was kite surfing or snowboarding or rock climbing, one of those things, maybe it would have been easier to deal with psychologically because you put yourself in these positions knowingly, you know the risks. And when you're hit by a car, it's completely outside of your control. But what I came to realize in my recovery is whether it was someone else's fault, my fault, whatever, it was still the situation that I was in. It was still my body, my one home, the one thing that I have to make the most of every day that I needed to put my energy into to fix. And so once I'd kind of got over that little bit of, there was definitely some anger, if I'm completely honest, for the driver.
I'm not
It
surprised.
was, yeah, but it was still down to me and my body to get myself fixed. And that kind of determination, getting out of bed when I hurt, doing the physio when it was just the last thing I wanted to be doing. I think part of my resilience came from goal settings, and helping me strive to go forward and make games, whether they were little games like making it to the toilet on my own so I didn't have to pee myself in a bedpan. Actually, that's quite a big game because it was quite nice not peeing myself. But putting my own socks on.
Working on that.
We get there.
Putting my own socks on, making it downstairs to enjoy a meal, all the way through to when I first decided to get an off-road motorcycle. And a lot of people don't realise I didn't do off-road or motorcycling prior to the accident. This is something that I've fallen in love with since the accident. And when I bought my first
It's something I've fallen off a lot
of. Yeah, and me. But I was actually bedbound when I came up with that idea. And my husband, being just an incredible support in my life, was like, what? Okay, yeah, we can get you a dirt bike. So we went out and got me one, but it was 5 months until I could even sit on it. But it was there, sat there as a reminder every single time I couldn't be bothered or I hurt just too much and I didn't have the energy. It was like, come on, Vanessa, we need to go ride. And that goal setting's helped me a lot.
So what I think is really interesting, Paul, is you think of some of the topics we've talked about over the last few weeks on this, and you're kind of living proof that works, Vanessa, actually, in a really nice sort of a way. I mean, we have this thing about fear standing for false expectation appearing real. So you start to focus on this might happen, that could happen, what happened if that car hadn't run that light that day? What would have happened if I'd have not been on my bike, if I'd have been a minute later with my cup of tea in the morning, and all of those things that you can't do anything about whatsoever. And interesting, we did a school session the other day, and two of the kids, obviously the exams at the moment are all over the place, and one of the kids was like, well, yeah, but the other school at the road, they haven't got to do this and do that, and the third school that's in the town, they haven't got to do this, and it's only our school that's been forced to do that. And we sort of said to them, look, I know this is going to sound harsh, but so what? It doesn't matter. That's the system that you've got there in front of you, and that's what you've got to work with, my friend, and you've got to make that work for you. And it's interesting to hear you say that about you go into a spiral. Yeah, what about what I could have, should have, I can't this, I can't that. But actually then, so how did you then bring it back to like what I can control? How do you focus on what I can control?
Yeah, part of that was actually learning to accept myself, in complete honesty. I was actually diagnosed with a few mental health disorders through my recovery, and one of them was change disorder. And I no longer saw myself as me. I would talk about myself in the third person. Vanessa was that cool, fit, strong person who could do pull-ups and kite surf. Me, this like broken, useless body. It wasn't me. It actually was quite confusing for other people because they were like, hang on, who's Vanessa? I thought you were Vanessa. And I joke about it now, but it was a really hard period because I actively hated my body. I didn't connect with it. I didn't associate it as me. And in order to go through recovery, you have to be at one with your body, because if you're not going to be treating it right. You're not going to be doing all of those subconscious things that we don't even think about to respect it and to heal it. And part of that was actually me realizing that I don't think having a massive accident and coming out the other side, I don't think it's recovery, because at no point will I ever recover to what I was prior to that accident. And actually part of me doesn't want to. Okay, I don't want to be living with pain, and I wish my body wasn't a grumpy little poo, excuse my language, but I've learned so much on the mental, physical, appreciation, perspective, gratitude side that it's not a recovery. It's like some kind of irreversible journey where you grow and learn and come out the other side as a different, better, slightly reconstructed version of yourself as such.
I wonder if we can take a bit of that from, obviously not to the extreme that you've been through, Vanessa, but maybe we can, just over the last year or so, a lot of people have almost been sitting there just going, I'm just gonna keep quiet and keep pushing on, and hopefully everything will just go back to how it was, and eventually we'll recover and we'll just go back to how things were a year ago and everything will be fine. But more and more it looks like we're never going to get back to where we used to be. It's going to be a new something, which is going to be different. It's been tough to get through, obviously not the same, but it's that keeping going, resilience, trying to get better, trying to focus on what life's going to be like in the new world as we come out of it. I think, certainly a lot of us in business can, have been, some of us in business have been just crossing our fingers and hoping everything will just, if I close my eyes and wish hard enough, maybe it'll just go back to a year ago and we'll just ignore this year. But it's probably never going to be like that, is it? As you were saying just now.
Yeah, I think we have to learn from it, and it gives you new ways of looking at things and challenge yourself to work out how can you make the most of that situation. And so for a lot of the time through my recovery, the sports, the pastimes, the friendship circles were gone, really, as far as what I was able to do in my life prior to.
Was that just because you can't hang around with them anymore, if you see what I mean? Just because physically you're not able to kind of literally hang around in those groups anymore?
There's different elements. Part of it is that, well, they still wanted to go kite surfing, so they didn't want to sit next to a bed.
Can I let you a secret, Vanessa, while we're here, by the way? Right, Paul is the most rubbish kite surfer I've ever met. And I got invited to that. He's been doing it for ages. And Paul is usually brilliant at most things I've ever seen him do, and it's really bad. So if you do know anybody, we actually need some help for Paul, please, somebody. I mean, he's got a garage full of kite surfing kit, but it doesn't seem to help.
We're making slow, steady progress. Leave it at that. I'm not a natural kite surfer. I think
as long as you're having fun, it doesn't matter.
The amount of swearing that comes out of my mouth while I'm there, though, maybe not. and the other year, just before, I crashed into the beach, which everyone finds very funny. They're like, "Didn't you notice it?" And I was like, "No, I was too busy looking at the kite and hit the beach and broke my toe." It was really annoying. But anyway, there we go.
No. Amazing. So the element of the friends, you really learn who your real friends are, and some of them are friends because we had the shared pastime, so they'd still go kite surfing. And then part of it was, for me, psychologically, it was too emotional and hard to be around the sports, because all I wanted to do was effectively have a new body and be able to do them again. So almost like a protection of my own mental state, I didn't put myself around them for quite a few years. It was probably only 3 years later that I was able to go back to the wakeboarding lake and just enjoy being at a lake. Whereas prior to, I would have just been in tears.
One of the things I think...
So there was definitely...
Yeah, sorry, go on. I was going to say, one of the things I think I find really interesting is we have developed a little bit of a tendency at the moment to talk about kind of health, physical health, whether that's weight or cardiovascular health or whatever you want to look at, and mental health, and almost as though the two things kind of aren't connected, which is one of the things I find that quite interesting, that as a society we seem to have kind of disconnected those two things, but to me they're just intrinsically linked. I mean, because I think in your case, that your kind of physical health, if you like, i.e. your body, is perceived as failing you, and kind of your mental health almost follows, because you're judging one with the other and you take one with the other. And I think it's equally possible the other way around. So in actual fact, it's no secret that I've suffered with depression and anxiety a bit, and occasionally I go the other way. So that actually the mental health, if you like, actually then stops me wanting to go outside and look after my physical health. So it's interesting to hear what you said, because I mean, obviously Paul is, albeit animals, not people, but actually when you start to, you can't take the two things apart, is what I'm trying to say. I think they're intrinsically linked.
I agree. I'm a trustee of Vet Life, which is a veterinary mental health charity, and absolutely, we really should eventually get to the point. And we're not there as a community, as a world, as a profession, as a human race. Get to the point where we're not talking about physical health and mental health, but just health, because they are just so linked. We know that getting out and about and doing physical activity helps our mental health, and we know that mental health has an impact on actually our physical health as well. But people are much more accepting of physical injuries than they are with mental injuries, still to this day, no matter how much we talk about it and shout about it and discuss it. I know, Tim, your entire focus, one of the reasons for climbing Everest was to try and talk about mental health and just try and get it out there as it's okay to actually discuss it. But people just seem to be more accepting of a broken leg than of anxiety and depression. Hopefully things are changing. I'm not sure they are quite there yet.
But I think, Vanessa, you must be interested to hear from you, because you must see that, actually. Because when you see physical injury, obviously we've seen it. Paul and I have, sadly have military friends that have lost arms and legs and stuff. And actually, and it must have been the same for you, it'd be interesting to hear, because the physical injuries you've sustained, you can see, if that makes sense. So when you're lying in a hospital bed and you've got those photos of you that, all smashed up and whatnot, it's relatively easy for somebody to understand that journey. So I can look at the photos of you on your website, whatever, of you, with your legs in cast and this and that and the other, and that I think I understand, right, when I look at it. But I think one of the biggest challenges with the mental health side of it is we still have the remnants of a generation that doesn't like to talk about it at all, and that's not a criticism. I understand it. The world's a different place. But I think also it's a really difficult thing to explain to somebody, or hopefully it's getting better. But when you say to somebody, well, actually, I've had this huge psychological effect from what's happened to me, people can't see or touch that almost. It's like they don't understand it. And therefore, you have to explain it. So therefore, you're having a kind of slightly awkward conversation, maybe. I don't know. It's just interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, mental health is a really challenging one, because I think a lot of people can't quite relate to it at all.
Yeah.
So if you've ever cut your finger on a bramble, you've experienced pain. So you can magnify that pain and think, oh gosh, a broken leg must really blinking hurt, right? But until you've actually been in the darkest place you can possibly imagine, where it feels like the world is coming in on you, you don't see the point of even getting out of bed, you're completely clouded by the pain, you're dependent on painkillers. Until you've been somewhere like that, it's really hard for someone to see, well, hang on, why would you not just get up and put a smile on your face and brush it off? Because you can't, there's no little version of it as such. It's so all consuming. Everything clouds almost. I'm not sure I described that very well.
No, so I think it's funny enough. I think it was really good. And in fact, much as I would hate to send any of our listeners to another podcast, but actually, if you go and listen to Dame Kelly Holmes on on the High Performance podcast, she says almost the same thing. And she says one of the biggest challenges she faced was that actually, all at the same time, half of her wanted to go to the Olympics more than anything in the world. The most driven athlete you can ever imagine. Never lost sight of the fact she was going to go to the Olympics and win it, which she obviously did. But at the same time, half of her didn't want to get out of bed in the morning and didn't want to go on because the dark clouds were amongst her. And she said that conflict between one or the other was almost as debilitating as either or, if you see what I mean. It's the sort of beating yourself up about not feeling okay.
Actually, that's something that I have got much better with it myself. I manage my pain now. It's certainly not over. And previous Vanessa would certainly have beaten myself up over it. If I was hurting, if I didn't want to do stuff, I'd make a big deal. I'd get angry at myself. And for anyone who's thinking, hang on, I don't believe that mental or physical pain are connected in any way. One's your brain, one's your body. There's a really little exercise that we can do super quickly now. So in your head, I want you to think about someone that you absolutely blinking hate. Someone that just makes your blood boil, like they're that horrible, manipulative, maybe they're angry, maybe they're rude, maybe they've upset you, they've stolen from you. Think about them and really focus on them and think about how you feel.
It's not you, Tim.
And now I want to think about something that you just love, a person you love, your cute little dog, your beautiful wife or husband, your kid, that amazing feel when you have a lump of chocolate cake, something that you just love.
Again.
And then feel how you are. And most people on the first one will almost get a knot in their chest, and if you focus on it long enough, it can almost start to constrict your throat and like feel like a weight on your chest. Whereas the happier one, the love, almost kind of lifts you up and makes you take a little weight off you. And that's a really, really simplified version of the extremes that your mind can put onto your body. And so when we're talking about beating yourself up, when you're already physically not feeling great or mentally not feeling great, and then you start to self-hate and not feel good enough and pressure on yourself, you're actually massively spiraling it and making it down, and actually taking a step back and going, you know what? It's all right that I'm not okay today. I'm not going to beat myself up over it. Tomorrow is going to be a different day, or after lunch is going to be a different day. What can I do right now to try and put a little smile on my face, to maybe lift my spirits and not beat myself up over it? And just remember that we're all human. I think one of the things that I really hate about social media is how life is all perfect and you get these 9 shiny squares of everything's amazing. And I'm sorry, but if you believe any of these accounts that think the world is that perfect and shiny, then it's just not. And that's one of the things I've always tried and do in my content, is just be real, because life isn't perfect and we all get our battles, and a lot of people's battles you can't even see, particularly if they're mental. I mean, for me now, someone looks at me, they think I'm absolutely perfectly fine, but yet I wouldn't go anywhere without a pack of painkillers. You know, life is difficult. Life does throw us horrific curveballs, and we all have struggles, whether they're staringly obvious to an outsider or completely invisible. But we've just got to remember that that's normal.
So you know, this
and
is really
work out
interesting.
ways to.
I did a bit of a study. I've got one of those watches on that you've got on that tracks, you know, how far and how fast you
Yeah.
run and all that sort of stuff. And I'm actually not a massive fan of tracking all the data all the time. And I think it can cause you as many problems as it solves, to be honest with you, on occasion. And interestingly, Chantal Paul, isn't she one of our elite triathletes that we kind of sponsor? Ironically, she's turned hers all off and she just goes and trains, but she's at a slightly different level. But well, I say slightly, I mean like a massive different level. But one of the things that I noticed when I first started using it is I did a bit of an experiment myself, and I started to. At the time, I was running 5 kilometers, sort of, you know, reasonably consistently, sort of 17, 18 minutes, something like that. But I was running 5K sort of reasonably consistently, and then one day in particular, I thought to myself, "God, I just feel rubbish today. I'm rubbish," and I was getting more and more angry at myself. I'm heavy. I'm not running. This is no good. I can't do it. And I was sent myself down this real spiral. And I'd almost forgotten that I got my watch off. So I glanced down, looked at my watch, which was sort of set in running mode, and I was actually traveling at exactly the same pace that I normally do. But so the whole thing was like perception in my head. I thought, well, that's actually really interesting. So then a couple of days later, I had the opposite occurred, and I thought, do you know what? I'm fine today. I'm kind of up for this. I'll do another kilometre or whatever. And I looked at my watch, and I was going at exactly the same pace that I always run out. And I just thought, and it wasn't intentional. It wasn't. And I just thought, wow, that's really interesting, because the only difference between this week and last week sort of thing was my perception, because actually the GPS is telling me that my performance is identical. Now, I'm sure there's all sorts of sports scientists that are now up in arms about, oh, it depends what you have for breakfast that day, or what you eat, or drunk, or whatever.
Not at our level, Tim. It really doesn't matter at our level.
But I just thought it was quite interesting, and it backs up what you're saying, that it's all about that kind of psychological perception, because the data was actually, my engine was running at normal temperature. So it's sort of simple as that. Just quite interesting.
That really reminds me of like expectation management in recovery and coming through. And if we're thinking about the mental side of it, setting goals and trying to push yourself on is really important, but they've got to be realistic, but with a stretch, because otherwise you're just going to set yourself up for really bad expectation management and a huge upset. The amount of times I said to myself, I'm going to go kite surfing in 3 months' time. Come on, Vanessa. Who are you kidding? And all that did was let me disappoint myself, because I wasn't being fair on my body.
But I mean, you've done a couple of hard enduro races since then, so I think you need to give yourself some credit. I've done a couple of 3-hour hare and hounds. That nearly killed me.
Yeah, no, that's true. They are very intense. got one coming up in a couple of weeks, and I haven't been on a bike apart from just before this call. I was playing in the garden, but lockdown hasn't exactly got me hard enduro race fit.
I suppose the only good thing news is probably everybody else is in the same boat, I guess.
Yeah, I hope so. So hopefully my determined mind will power through.
Yeah, exactly. What got in there? So top tips as we sort of wrap up today. What would you, if you're going to give a couple of top tips to somebody? So I don't mean necessarily injury, because we like to translate it to business. I just coming back to what Paul was saying earlier. There's a lot of businesses at the moment that have been going kind of, well, we'll just wait till it's all okay, or we'll just wait till this is over. And I think you're kind of living proof of the fact that that's not necessarily the best strategy. But I think also I like the bit around expectation management. So if you were going to give sort of 2 tips to enable you to be resilient, if you like, what would they be?
To learn and adapt, definitely, because the situation's always changing. So learning and adapting. I think the goal setting is really been a big one for me, and the goal setting directly links to that expectation management of making sure that your goals are, short-term, long-term, achievable, but stretch. And then just believe in yourself, believe in your company, believe in the people in your company, be a team.
Yeah, I think, Paul, that comes back to what we always say, it's all about being part of the solution. And actually, for me, a goal almost by definition is a forward-looking thing, isn't it? So you're kind of now focusing on what you can do and what is available to you, rather than what's no longer available to you and what's not working. So I think actually that all ties up, pretty well to what we've been saying about the whole because I can thing, doesn't it? Really.
Yeah, I love all the last couple of guests we've had on our podcast. It's all sort of by accident. It's all sort of aligning rather nicely, isn't it? It's sort of control the controllables, be resilient. It's not going to be the same, but it'll be as good as. Just because everything's gone a bit wrong now doesn't mean you still can't achieve whatever it is that you wanted to achieve. You'll just have to get there a different way in a different time frame. There's a few sort of running threads coming through, which is great to hear, actually.
Yeah, and I think as well, maybe the final point is all of these things are a series of kind of controlled regains, Vanessa, aren't they? We laugh about motorbikes. I mean, Vanessa can ride a motorbike off-road very well. I'm learning. And actually, when you watch some of these guys from the outside, if you've never watched it before, I don't care if you've never watched motorbikes before, Google Graham Jarvis for a minute and just have a look. You wouldn't think it makes any sense from a pure physics point of view. But actually, it's much like we say with a skiing pole. You watch it from the outside in, it all looks so beautifully under control and it all looks super easy. But actually, as Vanessa and I well know, and from your skis and stuff, is that what's actually going on is 100 corrections a minute. It is both feet working, clutch coming in and out, throttle adjusting, weight shifting, both levers on your feet being used. So actually what you're looking at is the result of 100 micro connections or corrections rather a minute, all of which are, on the edge of presenting disaster. And I think we sometimes forget that. We see the sort of beautiful outer shape that gets made, and we forget that actually everybody at whatever level is constantly, I like that, learning, adapting, correcting and adjusting, and focus on what they can do. So guys, thank you very much indeed. Enjoyed that, and we'll speak to everybody again. We'll speak to everybody again next week.